Okay, welcome back. We previously were talking about pivot tables, and we did promise that in the next lesson we're going to look at pivot charts. Pivot charts is another way of analyzing data, of making it simple for us to be able to see data and how they compare to each other. To get to pivot charts, make sure you're clicking on the table, and you'll see pivot tables selected or highlighted here. There are two sections of the pivot tables. There's the analyze and there is the design. Under the design, you find something like the pivot table styles, which if you hover over it, you see the different styles changing. And there are other things that you can do. For example, rows header, removing the rows header and bringing it back, column headers and bringing it back. You can also include bounded rows if you want, bring it back. It's just if you remember correctly, when we dealt with charts in previous videos, this is exactly the same thing that we were able to do. However, in this lesson we're going to go to the analyze section, where if we go on the right hand side, we'll see pivot charts. So if we click on that, it is going to give us this insert chart dialog box. This is again similar to what we saw before when we worked on chart in previous videos. The only difference, I suppose, is that the data here directly respond to what is happening within the chart. As we go along, you see what I mean. Okay, so now we are going to select a specific chart. There are different ones. If I hover, if I click on it, I should be able to show you the different examples. Again, the chart you select is going to depend on the kind of data that you're trying to analyze. It's not only column charts that you can select, you can also select line charts. Again, it depends on what kind of data you have. Pie charts, you can select that, the different pie charts, and see what's going on with the data. All right, so let's go back to column charts, and we're going to select the first one, which is the default. We're going to click OK. Here we go. So now we have, I'm going to minimize the pivot chart fit a little bit so I can bring the chart table here, maybe make it a little bit bigger. Okay, all right, so here we have the chart. You can see it is very busy. Just make it a little bit bigger. Okay, all right, so one thing you notice as you look at the chart, other than these lines that represent the different data points, you can see around here is the 2020 data points, and for each of the month is represented by the column legend represents the names of the sales staff for each of the month. Breath is blue, Danny, and so on have their own colors. That is the same with 2021. The other thing you notice is that we have filter points. We have filter points on the screen. If, for example, we only want to look at one particular staff member and not all of them at the same time, we can uncheck the select all here, and then maybe, for example, click on breath and click OK. And the data we have will only be for breath on the screen. You can see how the breath data is on the screen. But also notice how changes are happening on the data itself. So this is what I meant earlier, that as you make changes to the chart, is also reflected in your data points on the screen. Okay, so let's go back and bring back all the other guys. Okay, this comes back to us. And how about the month? We can decide to only work with maybe 1 month at a time. If I unselect this and then maybe look at the month of January, okay, here we can see now that in January 2020, this is how each of the staff sales staff did. Bread, for example, did very well in January 2020 as opposed to January 2021. And Danny did about the same, but a little bit better in 2020, and so on and so forth. If I remove this as well, unselect and bring everyone else back, we can also make adjustment to the year. We can look at only one particular year instead of both. Unselect that and let's say 2020. Okay, and this is what we have. Instead of comparative data point for 2020 and 2021, we only have the data point for 2020. Okay, so I'm going to remove that and select all again. So this is how to play with the data points here. Okay, another thing you need to know here is to see here is, notice we also have the chart element. If I click on the plus sign, which is the chart element, I can remove settings or include settings on the chart. I can remove the axis, for example, or I can bring it back. Okay, so I can bring it back. I can remove the grid lines. I can bring it back. That is how to use the chart element here. Let me click on the plus sign to remove that. I can also change the chart styles here. All right, let's go down here and look at this, for example, which is my favorite. We can use this instead, or we can use any other style. Okay, so that is how to use these chart pivot charts. Okay, the other tool to use to break down or analyze this data is the pivot slicer, and you can get to that by going to the analyze button here and clicking on insert slicer. As you can see, the different data points are represented on the insert slicer: the month, the year, the genre, sales staff, and so on. Let's try the month. Check mark that and click OK, and then we see that we have the different months represented here. So let's say we want to see the data for January. We click on that, and as you can see, the sales for each of the sales staff for the month of January in 2020 and 2021 is shown on the pivot chart. How about let's say February? The same thing happens. So with the slicer, we can actually make comparison by looking at the data points from different angles. All right, so to delete the slicer, select it and then click delete. You can bring it back by going to clicking on the data, analyze, insert slicer, and going back. Let's try the year. Click on that. Okay, and you can select individual year to analyze. Let's click on 2020. Now what we have on the screen is only the sales for each salesperson in the year 2020, and just looking at this here, the snapshot, you can see that Matt does a lot better than everyone else in the year 2020. How about 2021? You can see it's a contest between let's say Sam and Leah. So that is how to use the insert slicer and pivot chart in general. I hope this has been helpful. Play with this a little bit. Play with the different data points, and meet me on the other side.